So when people talk about the greatest Battlefield games ever made, the conversation usually revolves around Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and sometimes Bad Company 2. And all those games are absolutely fantastic and legendary in their own right. But for me, there's one game that rarely gets the credit it deserves, and that is Battlefield 1. Now, released back in 2016 on the Frostbite engine, Battlefield 1 was a huge gamble for DICE. At a time when almost every shooter seemed obsessed with futuristic warfare, jetpacks and advanced technology, Battlefield decided to go backwards over 100 years and base an entire AAA shooter around World War I. Now, on paper, that sounds like a terrible idea. But World War I wasn't known for assault rifles, red dot sights and modern military gadgets. Most people expected the gameplay to feel really slow, restrictive and ultimately outdated. But instead, DICE somehow managed to create one of the most immersive and visually stunning shooters they've ever made. Even today, nearly a decade later, Battlefield 1 remains one of the most unique entries into the franchise. And honestly, I think it might be the most underrated Battlefield game ever made. So let's start off with the campaign, and unlike previous Battlefield games that focused on one main protagonist, Battlefield 1 takes a very different approach. The campaign is split into multiple war stories, each following different soldiers from different nations and different parts of the war. Rather than telling one continuous story, Battlefield 1 tries to show you just how massive World War I actually was. You experience the conflict from multiple perspectives: a British tank crew fighting across France, an Australian messenger during the Middle Eastern campaign, an Italian soldier battling in the Alps, a young warrior fighting alongside Lawrence of Arabia, and a British pilot engaging in aerial combat. And ultimately it's a fantastic idea because every story feels different. One mission you're flying through the skies in a fragile biplane, the next you're commanding one of the first tanks ever used in warfare, then suddenly you're sneaking through enemy territory delivering messages behind enemy lines. It just constantly changes things up, and even the first campaign opening mission deliberately kills multiple playable soldiers to reinforce the idea that survival in World War I just wasn't guaranteed. But for me, the standout story is definitely the tank campaign. You play as a crew of a British Mark V tank named Black Bess as they push through enemy territory during the final stages of the war. The entire story gives me that serious Fury vibes. If you've ever seen the film Fury starring Brad Pitt, you'll know exactly what I mean by this. You spend hours with this tank crew watching them fight together, argue together and slowly wear down as the campaign progresses. By the final mission, you genuinely feel attached to the crew. For a Battlefield campaign that's only around 7 hours long on the hardest difficulty, that's pretty impressive. And whilst, let's be honest, not everyone's buying the Battlefield games to lift the campaign, DICE did an absolutely fantastic job making it worthwhile playing. Now, looking at the graphics and visuals, this is where Battlefield 1 just absolutely shines. Even today, Battlefield 1 looks incredible. Honestly, you could tell me that this game released a couple of years ago and I'd honestly believe you. The detail they've put into the environment is just beyond ridiculous. The lighting is phenomenal and the weather effects are some of the best I think we've ever seen in a Battlefield game. And it's the little details that really sell this game. One of my favourite examples is the mud. And I know it sounds stupid talking about mud in a video game, but Battlefield 1 makes it matter. When you're fighting through trenches or driving vehicles across muddy terrain, the mud's sticking to your weapon, it's churning up from the tracks beneath the tank, and it just genuinely looks like the terrain has been destroyed after heavy combat, which is just an unbelievably great bit of detail. It's such a small thing but massively adds to the immersion. And likewise, driving tanks through boggy terrain, it actually slows you down, so you've got to think about your route, especially in multiplayer. If you're wanting to take the quickest, easiest route, it might not actually be that, and you might have to make a bit of a flank, otherwise you're going to get bogged down where you could possibly get ambushed. And that attention to detail is something Battlefield has normally done pretty well, but in Battlefield 1 it might be the best example of where it's done just to perfection. The maps themselves are also incredible, whether you're fighting in the French countryside, Italian mountains, the Arabian deserts or urban ruins. Every location feels distinct, with no two battlefields looking the same, and it's something modern shooters often struggle with, especially modern Battlefield games. I actually think the maps on most Battlefield games now just don't stand out, whereas these, they were just absolutely phenomenal. Now, one of the biggest concerns most people had, including myself, was that going all the way back to World War I, whether they could actually make the gunplay feel, well, fun. After all, this was an era where mainly bolt-action rifles were being used. There was very early designs of tanks, experimental aircraft, and a very early entry of machine guns. So compared to modern military shooters, it sounds pretty damn limited, but somehow, once again, DICE made it work. The weapons feel appropriately primitive. You could tell they're using technology from over a century ago, yet the gunplay remains satisfying throughout. Every weapon feels powerful, every reload animation feels weighty, and every gun sounds, well, unique. And while weapon customization is limited compared to modern shooters, I actually think that's a real positive here. They're trying to stay relative and true to that era. Instead of giving every weapon 20 optics and 15 grips with 50 different muzzles, the guns just remain pretty grounded, and it's just so refreshing to play a game like this. The only criticism I really have is that some of the weapons can feel fairly similar. A lot of the bolt action rifles, you're not too sure which one's the best over the others, but ultimately it's not the worst thing to have, and considering the historical setting, it's almost unavoidable. Now, going back to the campaign, one of the things I really appreciated about it is how it introduces players to various battlefield systems. And what I mean by that is that every major vehicle in the game gets its chance to shine in the campaign, so you can try it out and get to grips with it. So if you want to learn the tank controls, aircraft controls, obviously vehicle combat and infantry combat, without even realising it, the campaign acts as a tutorial for your multiplayer. Recent Battlefield games have largely abandoned this idea, but Battlefield 1 does this brilliantly. I just love how they give you that a chance to, if you want to learn how to fly, you can jump into the flying mission, get used to the controls, fly about, customise them just before you jump into multiplayer and just get absolutely obliterated, which is something I actually criticised with the recent Battlefield 6 game, was that there was nothing like this in the campaign for you to test. You had to try and find one of these portal servers where someone had set it up. In this game, you can literally jump into the campaign and give it a blast, which I really, really do appreciate. Something I also love about this game, which I think was only unique for this game, was that every vehicle had entry animations. So seeing your soldier physically climb into tanks, planes and armoured vehicles, it just added so much more immersion. Again, honestly, I'm disappointed that they never continued this system in future Battlefield games. It's just one of those small features that made the world feel more believable, and I really, really liked that. It's such a shame that they've not done that in any other Battlefield games that I can remember. Maybe they did it in Battlefield 5, but I only played that a little bit, just because it just didn't sell to me, that game, whatsoever. Now look, as good as the campaign is, and I really, really did enjoy it, ultimately the multiplayer as Battlefield 1 just truly comes alive. The atmosphere is just incredible, the scale of the battles is ginormous, and the immersion is just once again on another level. Few games have ever captured that feeling of total warfare quite like Battlefield 1. You'll have tanks crashing through buildings, artillery exploding nearby, aircraft dogfighting overhead, hundreds of gunshots firing simultaneously. It just feels chaotic in the best way possible. It feels like you truly are in a war, and the map design deserves so much special praise too. Many of these maps are genuinely fantastic and some of my favourite I've ever played in any Battlefield franchise, and more importantly, they just all feel different. Recent Battlefield games have often been criticised for having large open spaces with little personality, or it being way too small. Battlefield 1 maps, they constantly encourage different playstyles. Some favour infantry combat, and others favour vehicles. Others create massive frontline battles, and the variety is just very refreshing, and just keeps things just feeling so damn unique. Even today, the multiplayer continues to be surprisingly active. Servers are still filling up and are almost full with ones that are still going on. You can still find matches. Unfortunately, the European server population isn't once what it was, but there's still absolutely still games to be found. And that just says a lot about the quality of the multiplayer near 10 years later after launch. And I mentioned it earlier, but it's definitely worth mentioning again that just the attention to detail is just what really elevates Battlefield 1 above any of the modern shooters, is just the sheer amount of care that they've put into this game. It's just, everything feels handcrafted, the sound design is phenomenal, the animations are just absolutely brilliant, and the music perfectly captures the scale and tragedy of the war. Even something as simple as entering a vehicle just feels special, like I said. You constantly notice little details that you didn't need to be in the game, but they just make the game better. It's one of those titles where the developers clearly cared about the authenticity and immersion, and the end result is that the game feels, well, timeless. So look, currently Battlefield 1 sits at very positive reviews on Steam, and honestly, look, it's so clear why that is, and I completely agree with it. The campaign, yeah, it's fairly short at around 7 hours, but it's genuinely an enjoyable experience. The multiplayer remains one of the most immersive experiences in gaming, well, history for me. The visuals are still just absolutely stunning, even by today's standards. The maps are some of the best in franchise history, and that attention to detail is almost unmatched. For me, Battlefield 1 is one of the strongest entries, if not the strongest, in the entire Battlefield series. It took a huge risk by choosing World War I as its setting, but that risk, well, it paid off massively. And while Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 often get the most attention, I genuinely think Battlefield 1 deserves to be mentioned alongside them, if not ahead of them. It may not be the most popular Battlefield ever made, but it might just be the most underrated. And if you've never played it before, you're missing out on one of the finest military shooters ever created. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like watching videos similar to this, please give me a subscribe and feel free to drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. And I'll catch you in the next one.